Tonight is a worship night, but it's also a communion Thursday. So I'm just going to have an usher or two come forward. And if anyone didn't get the opportunity to receive the elements, if you want to just raise your hand right now, just in the moment, we'll make sure that we see you. Just keep your hand up just for a moment. And while your hand is raised and you're receiving the elements, let me just remind you, if you're a guest with us, we're so glad you're with us this evening. The bread is actually on top of the cup. So if you right now want to just peel back that thin, transparent little piece, you hear that? You hear that sound? That's the sound that I don't want to hear 10 minutes from now when we're all kind of like in the communion moment and this unholy crinkle just goes across the room. If we can just get it out and just make it large enough so that you can access the bread when that time comes, that would just be great. That song is just so appropriate for a communion worship night. And in terms of what I want to just share with you for just a few minutes, remarkably, I'm coming back to the Psalms just for a short time before we begin the book of Revelation. And this Sunday, I'm going to be teaching Psalm 69. It's long. And so what I thought was I'd begin Psalm 69 tonight with you for the first few verses. Here's why. This is what's called a messianic passage. What that means is that what you're looking at here is something that begins with the psalmist, which happens to be David, but the fullness of the meaning of it as you move through is directly related to Christ, and there's just no mistaking it. The most powerful messianic psalm is Psalm 22, where it says that they pierced my hands and feet, and that was written 700 years before Roman crucifixion was ever even invented by the Romans. So we know that wasn't David. And as you read this, you'll see David, but you're going to also see Jesus. And we'll get through a few minutes together, and then we'll finish with moving into communion. What I want you to do is, as I close my time in just a few minutes of sharing Scripture, I'm simply just going to leave the platform. And as God leads you, and we continue with worship, just take a moment to remember that body that was broken for you and that blood that was shed for you. And in that moment where you are truly pressing into communing with Christ, in that moment you take that bread, you take that cup, and you just remember Him. That's His heart's desire, is that when you eat that bread and when you drink from that cup, that you remember Him. So I'm giving you that directive in advance so that in the quietness of the moment, we don't have to go through the directions. You know in your heart, as we move into this worship, you take that bread and you take that cup. I'm going to begin Psalm 69. Just remember that what I'm about to read to you is 1,000 years before Christ. But when you listen to the emotions that are described here, it's remarkable. God bless the reading of your word. Save me, O God, for the waters. Now, this is just incredibly ironic that this would be the message for this evening. For the flood waters are up. They're up to my neck. Deeper and deeper I sink into the mire. I can't find a foothold. I am in deep water, and the floods overwhelm me. I'm exhausted from the crying for help. My throat is parched. My eyes are swollen with weeping, waiting for my God to help me. Those who hate me without cause outnumber the hairs on my head. Many enemies tried to destroy me with lies, demanding that I might give back what I did not steal. So this psalm starts out with a cry for salvation. Save me, O Adonai. Bring salvation, O God, for the flood waters are up to my neck. And I was just talking to Pastor Chris Einwechter, who was leading prayer before this service over in our 712 campus. And he said when he came out, the flood waters were so high that he couldn't actually even access his car. So his daughter actually had to walk through all the way up to here, and now is sitting in the car with the heater on, trying to get the chill off and dry off, because we just happen to have floodwaters tonight. I had to get through them to get here. The reason that that's so significant is a bit of background. The Israelites did not like water. They feared water. Why? Because when they came out of Egypt, they had to walk through the walls of the Red Sea. They had to cross over the Jordan. If you ever look at the typography of Israel, you'll notice that the entire Mediterranean was Philistine territory. So they weren't really near the water. They just had the Jordan River and the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea, but they feared great waters. If they ever needed great water, their ships, they would contract the Phoenicians, and the Phoenician ships would do their work for them. So when you hear psalmists talk about floodwaters, that was a terrifying thought to them. And I mentioned this before, but I'll just say it again. Have you ever had where you were in the water? Because we're a shore town, so most of us have experienced this, where you're playing in the water and the wave comes and it lifts you up, and then it goes and it puts you down, and it's actually fun. But there's that rare occasion where it lifts you up and then it moves you. And when the water comes back down, there's no ground. And you're just like, oh no. And all of a sudden, the joy of your feet hitting the sand doesn't happen, and you're up to your neck. And you're all starting to panic and tread water, and you're just wondering, what direction and how far do I go before I'm going to find solid ground again? And I'm just saying, have you ever been there in your soul where something happened in your life where it just lifted you up, and when you came back down, there was just no substance under your feet, and you were just like, oh God, save me. I feel like I'm drowning. That's the experience that's happening right here in the opening of this song that he actually is singing. And then he says, deeper and deeper I sink into the mire. So I don't really know all the details of the typography of Israel. I've been there more than a few times. But they seem to often reference deep mire. That somehow, you remember when I was a kid, I don't know why, we were always afraid of quicksand. Maybe it was 70s TV shows or something, but we were always afraid of quicksand. Well, here they seem to get caught in the mire, and they cry out to God. And it reminds me of Psalm 40, which most of us, if you know your Psalms, you know it says, I waited patiently for the Lord. And he listened, and he heard my cry, and he brought me out and lifted me up out of the pit and out of the mire full of clay. And there's times where you just feel, it actually happened to me when I was a kid, I actually got into mud that was so deep that my brother had to run home and call my dad and come. My dad had to literally actually pull me out of this mud as we were playing in the woods in Fairmount Park, Philadelphia. And I never thought decades later that I'd be telling all of you that story, but that's really true. My father had to come with his strong arms. My father was a fireman for 34 years. He had to come with his strong arms and pull me right out of the mud. And it just seemed so simple for him. But it was actually terrifying for me, so much so that my brother ran through the woods back to our home to go tell my dad, you got to come, Matt's sinking in quicksand. And I read this and I just think, as we sing about sinking deep, and you can sink deep into your circumstances, Because right now there's a lot of circumstances that are overwhelming a lot of people. That's why I'm glad you're here, and I hope that in this evening there'll be some strengthening. And in the midst of this worship, God will pull you up. But as we sing, that we're sinking deep. As we sung, we're sinking deep into the love of God. Your love is so deep. That's what's washing over me. You are my everything. Deeper and deeper I sink into the mire. I can't find a foothold. I am in deep water. Deep water, again, always, most often symbolizing in the Old Testament danger or judgment. I'm exhausted from crying for help. My throat is parched. And of course, we remember that Jesus on the cross said, I thirst. And here you have the psalmist saying, my throat is parched. My eyes are swollen from weeping, waiting for my God to help me. And we remember Jesus. And we take this bread and this cup in remembrance of him. We remember him saying, my God, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? And theologians for years have wondered why he said that and what he must have meant. And I don't have all the answers to all the mysteries of Christ, but I can tell you this. He said that so that you would never have to. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why have you forsaken me? He said that so that you and I would never in our lives ever have to say that. Now we can hear the voice of the Spirit of God speak to your heart and say, I will never leave you or forsake you. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will not fear, because even there, you're with me. You comfort me. Those who hate me without cause outnumber the hairs on my head. Hey, you ever have someone hate you without cause? You have someone that was just plain mean and there's just no reason why? David did, and so did Christ. And as unjust as that might be, and as painful as that might be, when you go through that experience of someone that just seems like they've made it their personal devotion to make your life miserable, I'm telling you, according to Scripture, that you can't get closer to the heart of Christ than when you're hated without cause. So we cry out to God and we sing beautiful songs of worship, and we cry out for the mind of Christ, for the heart of Christ, for the character of Christ. And he says, okay, well then, if you really want to be that close to me and enter in to not just my resurrection power, but according to Philippians 3, the fellowship of my sufferings, then you will also be hated without cause. Jesus said in John chapter 15, powerful chapter. He said, again, a servant is not greater than his master. If they hated me, they will hate you. And then later on in John 15, it says this, as it was written in the Scriptures, they hated me without cause. Where does it say that? The opening verses of Psalm 69. Remarkable. Many enemies try to destroy me with lies, demanding that I give back what I did not steal. What an interesting phrase. And we'll close with that thought. Many enemies try to destroy me with lies, demanding that I give back what I did not steal. And you know that they lied about Christ. You read it in the Gospels. On the night of his trial, it says that they were bringing stories and false witnesses, but they couldn't get the witnesses to agree. But what did Christ steal? They demanded that I give back what I did not steal. He stole the hearts of men. He stole the hearts of men and women that were damned for hell because of sin and the breaking of the law and rebellion against God. He stole you, and he stole me, and destined us for eternity. He stole us, according to the Apostle Paul, from the kingdom of darkness. And in the King James it says, and he translated us into the kingdom of his dear Son. Has he stolen your heart tonight? Or is there something else that's stealing you away from devotion to Christ, commitment to Christ, submission to Christ, like complete surrender to Christ? I want to close, and then we'll continue with worship and your time of communion with the words to a song I've mentioned on a few occasions, but it just seems so appropriate tonight because it closes with that concept. And it's an old song by a singer-songwriter named Michael Card. And this is what he said. The song's called Why? And it says, why did it have to be a thorny crown pressed upon his head? It should have been a royal one made of jewels and gold instead. It had to be a crown of thorns because in this life that we live, for all that would seek to love, a thorn is all the world has to give. And why did it have to be a heavy cross he was made to bear? And why did they nail his hands and feet? His love would have held him there. And then he closes with this answer. It was a cross, for on a cross, a thief was supposed to pay. And Jesus had come into this world to steal every heart away. And Jesus had come into this world to steal every heart away.